Hi everyone, welcome to our webinar. This webinar is brought to you by Sarine Technologies, a revolutionary force in the diamond industry for over 30 years. Sarine, the diamond industry reimagined. Thank you for joining us. Hannah?
Just like a person, every diamond has a unique story waiting to be told. With Sarine Diamond Journey, you can now chart the unique story of your diamond from its source all the way to becoming a beautiful, sparkling gem. From the mapping of its interior and exterior birthmarks to revealing its latent beauty to creating its ultimate shape. Providing unquestionable proof of diamond provenance and the ultimate in scientifically proven traceability. Sarine Diamond Journey Traceability. Are you ready to discover yours?
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining our webinar today. Today, we're going to be exploring the topic of the sustainability awakening that has shaken the industry at large, and certainly the diamond and jewelry trade in the last few years. This is the first in a three-part series called Fast Tracking the Future, where we're going to be exploring and understanding the major trends shaping the diamond and jewelry market. Sustainability is the hot topic of the last few years. It's emerged as the key driver of business strategy, growing from the need to protect our planet, uplift communities, and ensure that products and services make a positive contribution to society. But what is driving this interest? And what does sustainability mean and encompass anyway? Is there a sustainability premium that we can gain? And if so, how much is that premium? And how are brands approaching their sustainability programs? So our aim today is to explore these themes to get a sense of how the diamond and jewelry industry is meeting the sustainability challenges of today. And we'll do so via our esteemed panel of experts who I wish to thank at the outset for joining us. It's a great pleasure to have you all on, and also to our audience who I want to thank for spending the time this morning, afternoon, wherever you are, for joining our discussion. And throughout the webinar, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section of the Zoom application, and we'll have time at the end to address some of those questions. So let me introduce you to our panelists in no particular order. Firstly, I'd like to welcome Florence Inyumaru, who is the Director of Transversal Projects at Boucheron, where she is responsible for overseeing the jewelry mason's sustainability transformation, which includes issues such as diversity and inclusion, amongst many others. So welcome, Florence. It's so great to have you with us.
Thank you.
And if I can ask all our panelists to put on their videos, it'd be great. Thank you. So welcome, Florence. Our second panelist is Shikha Jain, who is a partner at consultancy firm Simon Kucher and Partners, where she is a top-line growth advisor with a client portfolio that spans numerous consumer categories, including luxury goods. Shikha is also the author of the Global Sustainability Study published by Simon Kucher in October of last year. Welcome, Shikha. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you. And then our third panelist today is David Prager, who is Executive Vice President and Chief Brand Officer at De Beers. David is responsible for the marketing of De Beers and its brands, which includes leading the group's commitment to create a positive impact through its Building Forever sustainability framework. I hope that I got that right, David. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you again.
Thanks, Abby.
So So I think a good place to start is to make sure that we're all on the same page when it comes to what sustainability means to everyone. How do we sustain sustainability, and what does that encompass? So, Florence, maybe if we could start with you as a high-end, as a representative of a high-end jewelry brand. How do you define sustainability? What are the areas that you look at in your work?
Thank you, and really thank you for inviting me. It's a great opportunity to be all together and discuss about where we want to go as an industry. So, answering your question about sustainability, of course, I will start with the standard answer about it, making sure that our social, environmental, and ethical standards are respected along our full value chain, knowing that more than 80% of our environmental impact, is outside of our control. But more than that, for Boucheron, is start to think of redefining the cost of our business. Until now, we've always been doing business with only financial in mind. Today, we have to take responsibility for the other costs that we have towards the planet, towards community, to take responsibility for common future. So for us as a business is how do we think about changing our way of doing business, ensuring that we do not just mitigate the risk or mitigate the impact of our business, but start to create something that creates values for communities, for the environment. And our objective would be to say, how do we create a business that if it disappears, we will have a loss for the environment or for community. A business that truly creates value, and that is not only financial. So that is how we would define sustainability within business.
Thank you. And so, David, would you agree with that? That Florence mentioned the environmental, social, and ethical aspects of business practice. Would that fit into the De Beers sort of standards of sustainability and its focus?
It would. I mean, obviously, we, like Florence, we concentrate on environmental, social, societal, governance, socioeconomic development of the places where we operate. I mean, I think when we think about sustainability within De Beers, we think about two things, and these are not my definitions. These are definitions made up externally in the ether by people much more clever than me, but I think they have taken hold within De Beers. To be sustainable is to run a business in a way that allows us to meet our needs without sacrificing the ability of future generations to meet their needs. And that requires you to think about your consumption of resource, your development of communities, your protection of the natural world in a certain way. I also think we think about ourselves. We use the word sustainability, but we also use the word purpose. And what does it mean to be a purposeful brand? A brand focused on addressing challenges through our business model. And so the other definition that we attach ourselves to is that a purposeful company is a company that is able to understand the challenges in its sphere of influence that it needs to address, and to be able to address them while making a profit. And being profitable is critical, because without being profitable, we're not sustaining our businesses, and any solutions we deliver are not for the long term. So, I mean, that's how we think about those two things. And of course, the product we sell, diamonds, they have this dichotomy where they are, of course, their value comes from their rarity and the fact that they are finite. A diamond, we've reached peak diamond, and we're not, the earth isn't creating any more. But of course, that creates risk for the places where diamonds come from. And so as part of our purposeful focus, we've got to make sure that we're creating economic and environmental opportunity for those places from which diamonds are found.
Um, Thank you. That's interesting. I like what you said about creating benefits that's not at the expense of others. But I think the conversation has evolved beyond that. It's not about not harming, but doing good. And I think we've seen that in programs at De Beers and across the industry in general, and I think across wider industry as well, which brings Shika into the conversation, because Shika, coming from outside of the diamond and jewelry trade and therefore having a broader perspective across various industries, what do you see is driving this wider push towards sustainability in business and in terms of product choices? What is really pushing that trend that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think the first macro indicator that we're seeing is that the consumer is taking matters into their own hands. So maybe like a decade ago, we would have relied more upon national and international political actors and organizations, but now consumers are saying, well, we're in the driver's seat. We're the ones who can make change, and for-profit companies have to follow, just because of what David and Florence have said around the fact that you have to, as a consumer-based company, you have to cater to what consumers want. And I think that when we look at the consumer, there's further macro indicators that we've measured showcasing this heightened concern from sustainability. So commitment as the first piece of evidence, right? Almost 2/3 of consumers have said that they have made some change towards being greener in the last 5 years. So that's that first sort of commitment piece. And this number actually jumps into the mid 80s if we're talking about a modest change in behavior. Prioritization. So 50% or half of consumers now rank sustainability as a top 5 value driver. In the past, this rank would have been much lower, but its steady climb over the years means that it's become a key purchase criteria and a differentiator when it comes to the value proposition that different companies offer to the consumer, right? So they're going to be choosing based on who has a sustainable mission versus who doesn't. And spend, you alluded to this, Avi, that 1/3 of consumers report that they're willing to pay more for sustainable products and services. Yes, 1/3 are willing to pay a premium, but at the same time, what is, I think, for us and for me even more telling is that the remaining 2/3 is not, right? So in the past, where sustainability could be seen as a premium or a quote unquote luxury has now become mainstream, very much so.
And I mean, it seems that each generation sort of has a greater social conscience than the previous generation. But then maybe as they get older, they lose that. I'm not sure, but is it a factor that there is a younger generation that's becoming the mainstream consumer that's driving that change, or is it a real greater awareness amongst society in general about these issues? Shika.
Yeah, sure. I think that in our study, at least, and as we've been collecting trends over the past years, there is a heightened awareness. I think everyone recognizes that climate change, climate action, sustainability is the #1 public priority. But of course, this trends a lot younger, right? Younger consumers care about authenticity. So they demand transparency with the brands that they're going to associate with. They want to buy from brands, promote brands that mirror their own values, and so they're becoming wary of greenwashing. That's because that's also a sort of trend that's rising with the rise of sustainability awareness. So they do their own research. And the values that they care about are holistic. It's not just sustainability, it's broader social missions, it's fair trade, environmental impact, community engagement, community support. And I think that the companies, especially if we think about COVID and the pandemic, the ones that have stayed afloat are the ones that have shown authenticity in difficult times. And I think younger consumers, they state that climate crisis is the #1 crisis facing humanity today. And what they're doing is they're voting with their feet and with their dollars or euros or whatever towards sustainable options. So if companies that are not transforming today may not be around tomorrow.
David, do you see similar trends in the jewelry and industry, diamond and jewelry space, in terms of consumer preferences towards sustainable product and those sort of trends that are influencing the market, the wider market that Shika alluded to, affecting also the diamond and jewelry trade?
We certainly do, Avi. I mean, the idea of sustainability has taken hold. We did the De Beers Diamond Insight report that we released in the second half of last year, which showed that for the first time, sustainability considerations ranked on par with price and design when it comes to consumer preferences. And we also showed in that study for the first time that a considerable number of consumers expressed a willingness, almost a desire, to pay more for a brand that was able to demonstrate sustainability credentials. So 56% of consumers said that they would be willing to pay 10 to 20% more for diamond jewelry based on its sustainability credentials, and nearly 17% would be willing to pay up to 25% more for natural diamonds with real authentic sustainability credentials. I think the really important question is, well, why? What has changed? So yes, of course, public awareness has changed, right? And global events like COVID or the Me Too movement or the Black Lives Matter movement have, I think, galvanized particularly a younger generation toward more of a social awareness than perhaps previous generations. And already the millennial and Gen Z generations make up the largest cohort of diamond purchasers across the world. So they're considerably important to us, given their financial might. But again, come back to, well, why? But what has changed? Well, interestingly, a lot has changed in society, but not a lot has changed in purchasing motivations. Purchasing luxury and purchasing diamonds in particular has always been about signaling who you are, signaling what's important to you, signaling, in the past, wealth and status and some level of success and ambition. For diamonds in particular, signaling love and commitment. But now, driven by those kind of global events I talked about, for the younger generations, it's also really important to them that they express the type of people they are, the values that are important to them, and the way in which they choose the brands that they want to wear as expressions of their values is based on what those brands are demonstrating they're doing in the world, how they understand their responsibility and how they're delivering on it. So, the diamond industry has done a tremendous amount that I think most people on this call will know about for a tremendously long period of time. What we haven't been able to do is connect it to consumers that have been passionate about it. And I think that's now changing, and that's why this is really exciting.
Interesting. Florence, is that something you see in your brand strategy, that the sustainability aspect is connecting more strongly with consumers? And if so, then how does Boucheron develop its brand strategy? And its sustainability strategy? What are the factors that you take into account to meet that consumer interest?
First, I would like to nuance a little bit about what Shika and David said, and it's very true that we read a lot of studies and about the increasing awareness of our clients about sustainability and maybe willingness to pay more. But in our store network, which is not so much in the US, but in Asia, Europe, Japan, Middle East, we hear very rarely from clients directly in the store comments about sustainability or requests about sustainability. What we often say is that when they come to our boutiques to buy a diamond or a jewelry, it's a moment of celebration, of joy. They're buying a gift or they're getting married. So it's not the moment they will raise questions. But what is very important for us as a brand to understand is that often sustainability comes at the very beginning when they choose or not to go into our boutiques. And this is quite difficult for us to measure and to convince also management and decision makers to invest in sustainability, because it's difficult to measure the interest within the stores. We often compare it to customer client experience. You don't go to a store to buy because there's a good client experience, but you might never go back to a store if you had a really bad client experience. So our clients, they often come to our boutique prepared. They know which brand they are interested in, and they've often done their research first. So it's important for us to create this offer before we have the request in our stores, and that we're really convinced at this point that we need to do that. So it's not about adapting our sustainability strategy to the client request, because we have few at the moment, but it's really creating an offer, because as Shika said, the trend is really clear. We've seen with the COVID crisis, it has been accelerating, especially in key markets like China, where sustainability is becoming more and more important to the younger generation. So we need to anticipate this trend on sustainability. And you were also asking about our strategy. For us, in terms of strategy, the first will be traceability, because as you know, we have very complex supply chains, and raw materials is 2/3 of our environmental impact. As I said before, 80% is out of our control. So our position is not as an actor, but more of an influencer. We need to influence and motivate the food industry to move for us. We cannot work alone. So it will be through collaboration and influencing our food supply chain. And this will be really key to ensure a change on the long term. Today, our client will put Boucheron and the brand accountable for what is happening downstream. So of course, this will be the key focus, and we'll be also working on our own climate impact within our Boucheron corporation. But I won't go into too much detail because it will bore you.
Not at all. Thank you for that. And but I think just go and we'll return to the issue of traceability and being able to source back to the throughout the supply chain the journey of the diamond. But I do want to pick up on a point that you made about sort of preempting the risk, because when we speak to the average independent jewelry retailer, and I think it applies to the branded companies as well, that they tell us that consumers don't go into a store and ask about sustainability. And so David, to what extent is that built in? Is that built into the brand message and sort of into the subconscious of the consumer? That is it a matter of foregoing preempting the risk that might come up from a potential backlash from the consumer side, that a brand needs to protect itself from that, rather than responding to the consumer demand that's directly out there?
Yeah, so there's some of that. Of course, there's some of the protecting the brand and protecting the product and protecting the business from misperceptions and making sure that the client is proud to buy and give and receive the diamond, particularly because it's an emotional purchase. But I think what we find, or what we are finding, because this is still clearly an evolving space, is not so much that a client shows up in a store asking, sustainability questions and asking about your emissions and asking about, carbon footprint, but rather they are drawn to or not drawn to a brand because of what the brand stands for and what that brand allows people to express about themselves. And that's not rocket science. I mean, we all do that in our daily lives, right? The brands we choose, be it the clothes we wear, the car we drive, the restaurant we go to, it all says something about ourselves, and we choose them carefully depending on the importance of the product. And there is no more emotionally invested product than diamonds, diamond jewelry. And so actually what we found in the Diamond Insight report is consumers were more interested in sustainability considerations and more importantly, the brand that they were buying from and what that brand said about themselves. The more emotional the occasion was they were buying it for. So bridal and weddings, they cared more about it because they understood the meaning of that purchase and how long that purchase would stay in their family and be passed down for generations and the story they would tell about it. And the larger and more valuable the piece was, there was also a stronger consideration for what brand sold it to them and the sustainability story behind it, again, because it's a more meaningful piece. It was going to be with them for longer and it was more important to them.
Okay, Shika, is that consistent with other industries? Are brands sort of ahead of the curve when it comes to meeting those sustainability challenges? What is your observation in the wider consumer space when it comes to those asking those questions in the store?
I think you'll see the full gamut, right? There's going to be certain industries where sustainability has just been historically more prevalent, and some industries where it's just now gaining importance, right? So I think a simple way to kind of think about it is that the importance of sustainability across a consumer's daily life is, first, it's like the home. So consumers are prioritizing things like energy, efficient construction, utility, consumption. Second, it's sort of what's inside the home. So all of your consumer goods, physical goods. And then lastly, it's everything outside of the home. So things like travel and tourism. So you can see that there's sort of this, how consumers have been thinking about it. Energy efficiency, just utilities, that's just been something that's been around for so long. But at the same time, in the consumer world specifically, there are brands that have demonstrated that you can be 100% sustainable, right? Or at least push for that. Not maybe 100% sustainable, but conscious of it and mission driven. The most famous maybe is Tesla in that space. But because consumer goods tend to be so visible, and we've already established that consumers are really driving this change towards sustainability, I think it's no surprise that even traditional brands have recognized that they need to become sustainable in order to remain competitive, right? So fast fashion brands, luxury goods, they've already started to offer sustainable collections or product lines or a specific assortment that is more sustainable than the rest. And you're also seeing a rise in the circular economy. So in our research, consumers predict that in the future, that the trends are towards more secondhand goods, refurbished goods, rented goods, versus buying more and more new items. So there could be a world where, and we've got the jewelry experts here and the diamond experts here to answer, that there might be more secondhand markets or just more circular economies that will take hold even in the most sort of premium spaces. You're already seeing that with certain things like handbags, very, very luxury handbags or watches. So there is a world where I think in the future, this could be true, especially for some of the most durable items in the world, right? And I think, sorry, one last point I also want to call out is we talked about the ability for a consumer to grasp or not grasp, right? This concept of emissions and the supply chain and the operations and the manufacturing process. For them, it's very difficult to quantify those things, right? To understand, well, what is sustainability? Like, I don't know, how do I put this in context of reduced emissions or a cleaner supply chain or sourced raw materials? So what's interesting is that we asked all of those in our study as well. And for consumer goods, consumers equate things like lifespan, durability, longevity of the product as one of the elements of sustainability, right? That's the proxy and the default that they're gravitating towards, because they cannot really, the average consumer can't really quantify things like emissions in their head.
So those all sort of fit into the diamond narrative, I would say quite fittingly, and so David, I'd like to take a step back and I think you've all had experience in this, Shika in your advisory work, and David and Florence in building your brands. But how does one begin the sustainability journey? And I'd like maybe to start with David, to draw on to maybe explain what the thinking was behind the Building Forever program at De Beers. Starting from the ground up, and what lessons can an average diamantaire or jeweler who wants to get in line with sustainability issues, what was De Beers' approach to developing that Building Forever program? And maybe it's an opportunity to explain what the Building Forever program is.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Abby. I mean, I started when you asked us for a definition on sustainability, saying that to be a purposeful organization, which is the word we use at De Beers, you're an organization that is understanding the problems in your sphere of influencing and addressing them in a profitable way. And that's really what Building Forever is all about. It starts with an understanding of the challenges within our sphere of influence, none more critical than the fact or the realization, of course, as I said earlier, that the thing that ultimately gives diamonds their value and gives our business its value is that they are finite and rare. And that inevitably creates existential risk for the communities and countries in which they're found. And Building Forever is all about, we're really good at puns and plays on words in De Beers. So Building Forever is all about building for the time after the last diamond is discovered and recovered, and building societies that can sustain beyond that. And we launched our 12 ambitious goals out to 2030 the end of 2020. And they're built, or they're grounded in the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And really they have 4 pillars to them. The first is protecting the natural world. We can't possibly sustain a future in the communities and countries in which we operate unless we're working to do our part to save the climate and to save the planet. So we've got goals around being carbon neutral within 10 years across all of our operations. Now we have clearly mining operations. That is no easy feat, and it takes a tremendous amount of investment and innovation, but it's something we're committed to. Reducing our water footprint and usage by half, and achieving net positive impact on biodiversity. De Beers has 500,000 acres of conservation area set aside, which equates to about 6 hectares for every 1 used for mining. And those are set aside to protect animals and vulnerable and endangered species. And how do we continue to expand that and grow it? The second pillar is leading ethical practices across the industry. As the world's leading diamond company and as a leading diamond miner and supplier, we've got clearly a role to play in driving ethical practices, not just within our own business, but within our clients' business. So our best practice principles program is all about lifting up the diamond midstream to ensure that it's got a North Star for the ethical and governance framework that the whole industry can be proud of and that clients can be proud of when they purchase a diamond. Our third pillar is accelerating equal opportunity. Now, this is, again, an understanding, if I go back to how do we understand the problems that we need to address and turn the apparatus of our business to address them in a profitable way. We believe that we've got a role to play in accelerating opportunity for women, not just within our business, but within the industry. So we've partnered with UN Women to support 10,000 female entrepreneurs in Southern Africa and drive 10,000 girls towards STEM subjects and drive gender parity across our workforce and give opportunities for female designers in the jewelry sector of the industry. And then lastly, our fourth pillar is partnering for thriving communities, supporting jobs. So we support 4 jobs on our operations for every 4 jobs off our operations for every 1 created on our operations. And we're invested in building skills partnerships in the communities around which we work so that in labor sending areas, people have opportunities to get jobs. So we've bucketed these, Avi, into 4 key pillars that help us organize our work and think as an organization about what problems it is we think we want to solve. We've put aggressive targets against these buckets, against these pillars, some of which we frankly don't know how we're going to solve in the next 10 years. We just know we have to. And so that's part of what drives us as a business. The plans to meet these targets are built into our business planning. They're built into our budgets. They're looked at every executive committee meeting I'm at with our CEO and our executive leadership team. And they're core to our fundamental operating model now, because we understand that, sustainability, if in the past it was kind of on the side for some corporations, it's now right at the center of our offering, not just to consumers, but also to the communities in which we work. So Building Forever is all about creating value to the communities in which we live and work, the countries, to our employees and our people, and then ultimately to the client that buys our products.
Thank you, David. And Florence, I mean, you mentioned the aspect of traceability and sort of the being able to trace or track the good that the industry is doing, or that your product has been involved in throughout the pipeline. So to what extent are you taking note of these sort of programs further down or further up the pipeline, whichever it is, in terms of your suppliers and your suppliers, etc.? Are there specific areas that are important to Butcheron that you want to see highlighted in your supply? Florence, you're on mute. We don't hear you. No. Okay, well,
Can you hear me?
we can hear you, yeah. Now we can.
I have a problem with my microphone, and during the test it worked fine, but I
No
hope this will
problem.
be okay.
The sound is better now.
For the audience. Okay,
No worries.
great. First, I wanted to react to David introducing the BIS framework, and I wanted to thank him because it was really an inspiration, and also at Boucheron, and I think across the industry, we've been, studying carefully your commitment. Our commitment at Boucheron were under the caring sustainability objectives with high ambition for 2025, and now we're going to be laying out 2030 objectives because we are very happy to have achieved the objective we had for 2025 with 4 years advance. So now we need to set more ambitious objectives. But thank you, David, because it's really interesting that we can have clearly transparent ambitions across the industry and really study each other's strategy so we can go for a better trajectory. So you were asking me about traceability. We have an ambitious objective of 100% traceability of our key raw material by 2025. As we have started with gold in 2020, we have achieved 100% responsible gold. It's not only recycled and certified gold, it's also working through the Caring Precious Metal Fund, ensuring that we also support the green extraction of gold through fair trade, fair mine, but also specific regenerative program in terms of reforestation in the mines or a support group for women. We are working on really different aspects to also ensure that we support the greenification, let's say, of gold extraction. And we want to take the same approach now with diamonds. We have announced a few weeks before our traceability partnership with Sarine for our center stone diamond for solitaire line, and it will become a new norm for us at Boucheron. We have the ambition to switch by end of 2023 to sourcing only fully traced diamonds from a mine or group of mine for our bridal collection to achieve 100% by 2025. And of course, we also have colored gemstones for which we are really moving ahead on a case-by-case basis because it's a very complex supply chain. So today, more than 50% of our colored gemstone in jewelry are traced, and we are able to follow them from the mine every step of the way. So why is traceability important is because we really need to know each step, which was not the case before. We need to know the steps because we want to create long-term partnership with our supply chain, not only with our direct suppliers, but also throughout the value chain to ensure we can support, as David was saying, the move towards better social standards, better environmental standards, ensuring that there is a living wage respected across the value chain. And of course, we are at the beginning of the journey. There's a lot to be done, but the first step will be traceability, because without traceability, you won't be able to be accountable for anything. Mm-hmm.
So you're starting with the bridal collection, and obviously Boucheron has a wider range of products. So Florence, what are the biggest challenges in expanding that your sustainability programs and perhaps more specifically the traceability aspect? What are some of the concerns or challenges that you need to overcome?
Well, for traceability, we really need to understand the difference of different material. In order to have a sustainable traceability strategy, you need to have materials for which you have a recurrent sourcing and a predictable sourcing, because when you start to become, to follow your sourcing from the rough stone to the cut diamond, you need to anticipate much more. You need to manage much more closely your supply chain. You need to adjust the loss of agility within your supply chain, and you also need to commit, because when you have traceability, then you start to need to commit to the different players across the chain. And I'm not talking about the mine, I'm also talking about the workshop, the diamond manufacturer, because if we want to start really sustainability programs with them, for example, we will start to discuss green electricity with them and fair wages within our atelier. Then we need a long-term relationship. So That's why we started with the bridal, because it's a very predictable and recurrent sourcing that we have. We start from the 0.2 carats, but the ambition on traceability goes up to the high jewelry. Of course, on high jewelry, we will be much more agile in terms of traceability methods because exceptional stones need exceptional solutions.
Thank you. So David, I'd like to circle back to you on that. What sort of, I mean, it sounds from what Florence is saying is that there is a supply issue in terms of the industry is arguably still in the beginning stages of its sustainability journey. And so, De Beers is doing its work, and that would, I would assume, filter through to its sightholder clients. Is there a traction that's being developed within the industry where more? I don't think the problem is at the mining level. It's probably more in the midstream. Are you seeing the midstream manufacturers coming on board and filling this or recognizing the need to fill this demand for growing demand for sustainable product?
We certainly are. I mean, I think you said something very important there, that often the issue that people want to know about isn't necessarily the mine, but the entire journey. And so traceability is as important as origin, and provenance. Provenance is critical. So we are seeing, I mean, obviously we're doing work, I think, Avi, as you know, on our program, the De Beers Code of Origin. And the idea behind the De Beers Code of Origin is that working with our site holders, we'll be able to provide the impact and origin of every diamond that we discover and sell to our site holder, and that ultimately through the value chain, through an inscription, all the way down to retail level, the retailer will be able to share with the client where the diamond has come from, but critically the impact it has had. And we are seeing real traction for that. And again, we're seeing traction going back to what I said before, I think, because people are understanding that whilst the technical aspects of sustainability might not be appreciated by the individual client, understanding who brought the diamond to me and what that brand stands for is becoming more and more important. Mm-hmm. And so providing that, it's not easy to provide this traceability through the complex value chain we know we have, but providing that line from the source all the way through to the retail counter can be a very powerful proposition. Doesn't just give the client confidence that the diamond has done no harm, it makes them proud that the brand they're wearing has done good and that their purchase is part of that mission.
I think when we speak to the likes of De Beers and Bucheron and other bigger brands, it's one conversation, and then when we speak to sort of the smaller independent jeweler, the smaller independent diamantaire, they argue that this is pushing a more streamlined, consolidated industry. There's a cost involved that they can't expense. And so, Shika, firstly, I'd like to give you the opportunity to draw from your experience with other industries. What is some of the pushback that you experience or hear from companies as they start out on that journey?
I think so. The desire is there, right? Consumer companies, most companies, they recognize the importance of sustainability. They want to be sustainable. They want to be transparent, but they also have to understand the cost side of the equation, right? So they know demand is there. They just have to address the ability to transform. And that's something I think David also hit upon earlier, is that a company has to be profitable. So they have to do this in a profitable way. Otherwise, they themselves aren't going to be around much longer. In terms of some of the pushback, right? The mission-driven companies, some of the clients that we've worked with that are 100% mission-driven, they have sustainability as a core part of their brand proposition. They've already done the work from a supply chain perspective, from a resourcing perspective, operations and manufacturing perspective. And their goal is now, how can we build awareness? How can we put the product in the hands and homes of as many consumers as we can? And what are the right commercials to do so? So they're more figuring out the pricing, promotion, marketing strategies. But on the other hand, there's a lot of traditional companies that approach us. And for them, they're more curious, setting cost aside and the transformation requirements aside, on whether they can even get credit for being sustainable. So they could make the investment, but will they get credit for it? And for them, credit comes down to basic, things like, can they charge for it? Is there a premium for it? And time and time again, we find yes, of course, sustainability is at the forefront of the consumer's mind. It is an important value driver. And like I mentioned earlier, it's ranking in the top 5, and David's study is also saying that it's almost on par with price, quality, and other aspects. But at the same time, the consumer may not have the willingness to pay for it. Only a small group, a fraction of them are willing to pay, or the premium is not justified. So there's this dilemma that they're faced with, right? On the one hand, immediately, I'm not going to get credit for it, but I'm incurring a huge hit on the bottom line in order to become sustainable and transform the business. But I think the bigger insight is the threat that you may not do anything today, but if you don't transform, you just really risk losing more and more customers and consumers over time, because you will get disrupted, and there will be sustainable options. There will be mission-driven companies and alternatives that will then take away your share. So the imperative is there. It's just now it's so important to actually do the work,
right,
to meet the end vision.
David, would you like to
jump in on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would like just to jump in on what Chika said, especially that the sustainability transformation takes time. It can take many years before you are able to find the correct solution. 5 years ago, there was a lot of fuss about blockchain, which is a great technology, but is very energy consuming, but also only an enabler. Traceability is not about the magic formula. You really need to build partnerships throughout your supply chain, and this takes a lot of time. We've started to talk about traceability in 2015, and today in 2022, we're launching our traceability program after different pilots done with different partners. So also, I think a lot of work is being done by big jewelry brands today. It's done mostly in the closet. People are not talking much, brands are not talking much about it, because in the luxury sector, it's difficult to communicate on something when it's not perfect, and we tend to be over-ambitious before communicating. So I guess there's also a lot of, some brands will be doing a lot of work without saying, and in a few years, we'll see the brands that have taken the sustainability transformation within their business strategy, and the ones that are left out.
David, I saw you smiling at Florence's comments. Would you like to respond?
Florence's point about in luxury, we tend to not do anything until it's perfect struck a chord with me, which can sometimes be debilitating. But I agree with everything that's been said. I mean, this is not a signal, right? This is not, we're seeing signals somewhere kind of deep that this might one day be a thing. It's here. This is like a big flag being waved on the top of the mountain. The most important, the largest cohort of, in our world, diamond purchasers say that this is really important to them. Now, we just have to use our imagination for how sustainability manifests itself in the decisions they make. And Chika mentioned Tesla before. Tesla's a great example. If you go to buy a Tesla, it's unlikely, not impossible, but it's unlikely that you're going into the car showroom asking about emissions and asking about materials and where they source their rubber and how they got their metal. You're going in there because you know that your friends are going to think you're a friend of the earth. You know that your friends are going to say, this is somebody who's spent the money on an expensive product because because they care about climate change. And they're putting their money where their mouth is. And then you get to drive around all over town showing it off.
Yeah.
This is not that different. This is a really important purchase that people won't make often. It's expensive. A woman will wear this purchase on her finger, around her neck, in her ears every day, in some instances, and hand it down to future generations. And so it is an opportunity to express who you are and your values. So we have to have a broader understanding of what it means for a brand to be sustainable and why that's important to people. And I've said for a long time at De Beers that for us, I think the economics have finally caught up to the ethics, right? So the territory we're talking about is not new for De Beers. It's not new for Boucheron. These were issues that we talked about at the board table many years ago. You know, I talked about our land and conservation, 500,000 acres under protection for conservation and protection of vulnerable species. We didn't do that, 12 months ago. That's been built over decades and generations. It's just that it wasn't particularly an important touch point for clients until now. Now people truly care about it, and that's a really exciting space. So this is not it, like the question of what's the cost and can small jewelers afford this and independent jewelers afford this, I think is a false premise, false question, kind of a false straw man. It's here, it's important. I think the question, if you're not a large brand, is what does it mean for you? And how can you get in on it? And there are ways, knowing where your supply comes from, being part of the Responsible Jewelry Council, and understanding in your own context how you can make a difference in your community are all really good ways to start.
And I think there are opportunities as well for your independent jeweler in particular to relate the good that they're involved in. And I think David, you mentioned the UN Sustainability Development Goals, but the idea is not to take on all 17 of those. It's to really focus on certain aspects of it that can add value and show that you are in part of that story. I've got so many more questions, but I do want to open it up to our attendees. So I'm going to throw out some questions from the audience, if you guys don't mind. I'm going to do so anonymously. The first question is, what can be used as a tool of measuring progress towards the successful implementation of sustainability initiatives in hosting mining and processing communities, which I think is an interesting point. How do we measure progress and success? Maybe is another word in these sustainability programs. Shika, maybe if we can throw that to you, if that's okay.
In terms of mining and processing, I'm probably not the right person. We've got the jewelry experts here. But I think in terms of just general measuring progress and success, it is, I think one of the big things, one of the KPIs is brand love. If you can really be authentic, if you can build around the values of your target consumer, and whether that's transparency, social commitments, environmental commitments, whatever it is, and recognize that you're not going to be able to be 100% sustainable, right? A lot of brands have recognized that greenwashing actually hurts them than helps them. So being super authentic is key here. So brand love, brand advocacy, those are ways to see that you've done it correctly, right? And you can start small. You may not be a very sustainable company in terms of the benchmarks, but whatever you are doing, talking about the progress you plan to make, talking about what your North Star is, will only help. And then obviously, I think in the long run, it'll come down to basic financials and economics of, do you still have a customer base, right? Otherwise, the more you lose customers to alternatives, that shows that you haven't been able to keep up with the trends.
Thank you. I think that would apply also to the supply chain within the diamond and jewelry industry. Maybe it's an unfair question, really. How do you measure how do you measure doing good in the world? Is not the smallest step that one takes a good start, but I think you do want to see progress over time. David?
Yeah, well, Avi, the only thing I would add to that is I think the rule of thumb is to start with the problem, not the marketing execution, right? So the best way to not be a greenwasher is to not greenwash. Maybe that's the most obvious thing said today, but but for De Beers, by virtue of us obviously being in the communities, we've got teams of people who understand where the challenges are. And so the targets we set, I mentioned earlier, to train 10,000 women over the next 10 years to be micro entrepreneurs. It's the result of an assessment done to say, what will it take to change the socioeconomic dynamics of this community? And one of the things we know is the biggest driver for socioeconomic change than anything else is to uplift women, to help women get a job, to provide women with skills, to provide them with the kind of more nuanced support that they might need, because when woman earns $1, that dollar goes far further and is reinvested into the community than, frankly, when a man earns it. And so, but you start with a really detailed, technical, intellectual look at what would it take to start to address these problems. What are we good at as a business? How can we apply the apparatus of the business to that problem? What do we reasonably think we can target? What can we afford to invest in? And then implicit in the question is the importance of measuring at the highest level of the organization, so people understand the centrality of its importance to our strategy.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with David. I think having a clear goal, a clear framework, clear goals is very important, but you also need to have your full business aligned with them, especially your top management, because this will not happen if your top management is not aligned on these goals. They need to be really focused on the same goal and understanding not only the goals, but also the challenges, as David mentioned. And it's also very important to set objectives that are ambitious, because we are on track and in front of a very huge, climate change challenge. So we need to be very ambitious. And most of the goals, as David mentioned, we don't have today all the answers to tackle them, but we will find them only if we set enough ambitions. And as Paul Polman from Unilever used to say, if your sustainability report doesn't give a heart attack to your legal team, it's that you're doing it wrong. And I love that quote, because we really should set goals that put a heart attack to our management team, but then we can all be around the table and manage this with our suppliers, with our partners, with different stakeholders to try to reach these ambitions.
Thank you, Florence. I don't think too many people can disagree or argue with any of those points. Florence, we have a second question here, which I think maybe we'll start with you, and that is, what is the sustainability challenge that is keeping you up at night? And I think maybe that's a question that we can pose to all three of you, but maybe if we can put you on the spot first, Florence.
Today would be the size of the challenge. When you look at our supply chains, it's millions of people that are involved, while we are quite a small brand yet compared to huge actors in the high jewelry industry. So when we look at the scale, having really scalable sustainability solution, this is what keeps me at night.
Thank you, David.
I think I'll skip, maybe I'll make as default the climate answer, because of course, I think the climate keeps us all up at night. I think beyond that, Abhi, the thing I really do worry about at night is the growing economic disparity between have and have-nots, rich and poor. And it is unavoidable that we sell a very expensive luxury product to not a large cohort of people. And that requires us, again, to understand the context in which we operate and make sure that we are addressing inequality within our own sphere of influence wherever we see it.
We always say that it's no coincidence that diamonds are mined in the poorest regions of the world and consumed in the wealthiest. And I think it's a point well taken that it's a responsibility of that wealthier segments to make sure that that there's benefit across the supply chain. Shika, maybe I can pose that question a little differently for you, and that is when we're looking at the UN Sustainability Development Goals, is it company specific when you're advising in your advisory work and working with a company? I would imagine there's different interests across different industries and across different companies as well.
Yeah, I think the UN Sustainability Development Goals are a good framework for setting global guidelines, maybe and standards, creating sort of more or less, at least not an equal playing field, but at least something to achieve and ascribe to. I think the real change will happen elsewhere. And I think that's the paradigm shift that I alluded to earlier, that a decade ago, the national, political, international actors and organizations such as the UN would have been seen as those primary actors for driving positive environmental and social change in the world. But what I think we've realized that it's come down to basic economics in some sense, right? Consumers believe that they are the primary change agents along with for-profit companies, and that they're the ones that are actually going to demand. So they're in the driver's seat, they're setting the cadence for demand, and everyone else in the business or a supply side is there to meet this demand, right? If there's no demand then for your products, then you just don't have a business. So that's why I think we've just seen this sort of total paradigm shift in how people are viewing where change will come from.
Thank you. A further question which changes the subject somewhat, and I would like to pose it again to you, Shika, because you touched on this in your study, and that is what types of sustainability issues are on the horizon for Chinese consumers. And so I would extend the question to say, is there a geographical difference in the approach toward sustainability issues across consumers in China versus the United States or Europe?
Yeah, and I think this is actually quite interesting in our study. And I think I've seen this in other similar research as well. The Chinese consumer actually does self-report a lot higher in terms of choosing sustainable options when they are available, willing to pay premiums for sustainable options, citing it as an important purchase criteria when making decisions about products. In terms of the premium that they're willing to pay is also very high. So I think this is quite interesting because where I think that, I don't know enough about the China market to understand what's happening on the ground there, but I would imagine that at a macro level, if this is how consumers are acting and behaving, then I suspect businesses and for-profit companies will also start to transform, especially if they're catering to local demand.
Mm. Florence, is that something that you pick up on at Boucheron, that there's a difference in approach across various regions?
Yes, we do. I won't be able to comment in too much detail, but we see more and more focus on sustainability from clients in China. And it's really different, for example, in Japan, when it comes more from press and media. So the influence forces are very different from market to market.
Okay, sorry, just to clarify, can you repeat that last bit? That is influenced by social media, did you say?
No, the influence forces, it can become, for example, in Europe or in Japan, we'll have more and more sustainability requests from press and media. So it will really be the press and the media pushing the sustainability agenda, while in other markets, we will have more questions from clients.
David, did you have similar findings in your recent insight report?
Yeah, I mean, it's growing in all markets. Also, again, the attraction to brands from Millennial and Gen Z are growing in all markets. So kind of if you accept that the younger generations are more attracted to brands, we don't buy products, we buy brands, and brands provide a shortcut to trust, then it kind of it's almost less important whether they're asking a specific sustainability question and asking why are they attracted to one brand over another, and that what assumptions they make about the brands they buy. You know, I kind of think about it like an airline. If I leave my house today and I'm in London and I go to Heathrow and I travel on British Airways, I make certain assumptions about the people on British Airways because the brand provides a shortcut to me trusting it. So I trust that the pilot has done his safety training. I trust that the crew knows what to do in case of an emergency. I trust that the tires have air in them and that the engine has been maintained. And I think that's the power of a brand to provide assurance and confidence and trust to consumers who care about these issues but aren't necessarily asking all the detailed questions. And that is pervasive, not just in the West, but in China as well.
Right. I think it's almost assumed in within the brand, within the consumer relationship with the brand, that there is the sustainability message encompassed within that already. Which relates to I think we'll take one more question, a final question, and that is, how can one make a statement on provenance, or let's extend that to sustainability in general, if one does not know the country of origin, but I think it's more a question of PR that we're seeing. I'm changing the question a little bit. But which I guess as the host I have license to do. But how does how important is that PR message for a brand? Because I think we've seen a lot more messaging from within the diamond industry, and I think De Beers has played a role in this in that the sustainability aspect of a brand or a company or the industry is much more centered today than it was 2 or 3 years ago. We didn't used to hear about I always make the point that in the 80s a company would give charity on the side and not tell anyone about it. But today it's really part of the message who they are. Not about charity, but in terms of the good work that they're doing. So what sort of role does PR play in getting this message out? So maybe David, if we can circle back to you.
Well, so I'll answer that question, but I'll use my license as the panelist to go back to the original question too, Avi, and answer that one. I mean, I think the answer is there are more and more ways to understand the provenance of the diamonds you buy. If you're a retailer, there are platforms you can buy on that provide provenance. But clearly, companies like De Beers and companies like Boucheron with Sarine are investing in technology that is looking to provide provenance more readily. So this is a fast-moving space. It's a really exciting space. It's a space where our view is the more traceability, the more provenance, the better. We're kind of agnostic to who's providing it and from where it comes from, but the more we can provide a story to the diamonds that come to the end client, the better, because it lifts up the whole category. So you will see more and more provenance applied, whether it's from De Beers or others, to the diamonds people buy, and that will be really exciting. On your second question about is it PR? I mean, I think that implicit in the question, Avi, is probably a negative, that it's like a just PR. But it's important, if knowing where a diamond comes from, because you want to understand the impact it's had on people's lives, is important to you, then as companies, we've got a responsibility, as brands, we've got a responsibility to provide that information. And we've got to have the systems and the technology in place, not just to do it in a fail-safe way, but to be able to communicate it effectively so that people can be confident in what they're buying.
Florence, would you agree with that? And I actually didn't mean it in a negative way. I think it's I can understand how it might be misconstrued as such, but I think part of the challenge facing the diamond industry is that it's facing competition from other products, and this gives it a competitive edge, and so public relations is a way to show that added value. Is that something that you look at, Florence?
It's true, but as a company, as Boucheron, we don't communicate much on our sustainability effort, unfortunately, even though we plan on doing a little bit more about it. I think the communication is important, external communication is important, but what is most important is that this communication enables us to influence the industry. So we have much more reach out and reaction from our partners, from our suppliers, from different stakeholders within the industry that we have from actual clients looking at our traceability press release, for example. A second thing I would like to emphasize is we're not doing it for PR. What is most important is to train our retail team, because they are the first contacts of our clients. We are not in fast fashion. In jewelry, you take the time to tell the story of the product, and you spend time in our boutique, I hope, to choose the right product for you. So internal communication has been my primary focus, to have the full company and the full organization aligned on our objectives, but also to have our sales associates reassured and convinced of where we are going as a company, so they can really convey this energy and this genuine efforts that we're doing across our supply chain to our clients. So I would say that for Boucheron, PR, of course, but what was most important was internal com.
Great, thank you. And I guess I'll let Shika, you have the final say on this. How much of a tool is it for companies out there across industries to use their sustainability message in their to make consumers or their clients aware of their added value in the space?
Yeah, I think they absolutely should be messaging what they're doing and steps that they're taking. Why would you not, right? Like, I think that's super important. However, it has to be done with authenticity. And that's what we established earlier. No greenwashing, it's bad, it's going to hurt you, because consumers do invest the time to research the brands before they buy, learn as much as they can about their ESG goals and just the impact that the association that the consumer will have with the brand going forward. So as long as everything's done in an honest, transparent, authentic way, I think that's the way to go. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to show that you're trying.
Mm. And I think consumers see very clearly through the through any transparent efforts. Florence, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to finish by saying, this is maybe a common challenge that we have, at least in the high-end high jewelry industry, is that are we really sure that our clients are so aware of the impact of natural diamond and extraction? We have the feeling that the understanding of our supply chains and the understanding of our industry is very low. We haven't been in the spotlight, unlike some other industry, of course, the blood diamond, but after that, not much spotlight, especially on diamonds and colored gemstones. So I think that is what is holding back brands to talk too much about the efforts they're doing, because even if you talk with authenticity, our clients ready, when we talk about a wedding ring, for example, to take the full, to acknowledge the full, journey of their jewelry, really need to I think as an industry, become more transparent if we want to be able to talk about our accomplishment and our progress.
Great, thank you. I think that's an appropriate note to end with. I do want to thank all of our panelists, Florence, Shika, and David, for your contribution. It's been a highly engaging and interesting conversation for me, and appreciate your efforts in researching prior to the webinar, and your comments that you've made throughout the conversation. So thank you to all of you for participating.
Thank you, Avi, and thanks for inviting me on the panel, and thanks to the audience for joining.
Thank you, Avi.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who attended. This webinar is being recorded and will be published on our website, diamonds.net, as well as I assume on YouTube. So thanks everyone for joining us. Thank you for your time, and stay safe, and God bless.